Convicted murderer on death row in Texas facing lethal injection has had his punishment reduced to a life sentence following a U.S. Supreme Court ruling in February that said he was due a new sentencing trial because of racist testimony by a former chief prison psychologist. We covered this story right here on the show, folks, about Duane Buck. In 1997, he was convicted of the murders of his girlfriend and her friend. In the sentencing phase of the trial, his own lawyer called a psychologist to the stand who was asked if being black increased Buck's, quote, future dangerousness, and he replied, yes. In the 1962 ruling, Chief Justice John Roberts wrote that the testimony appealed to a powerful racial stereotype that black men are, quote, violence prone. And if I'm correct, Clarence Thomas was one of those two. Buck appealed, claiming he had not been properly represented by his lawyer. Buck, who's now 54, will be eligible for parole in 2035. I want to quickly go to our panel there. Scott Bolden, to you first. Here's what's interesting. A few weeks ago, we had a case on the show. We were talking on a Tom Joyner simulcast. And I remember Tom was asking the lawyers, it was the case in Georgia. He said, well, could there be a better case in terms of this? And the reality is, if you look at our legal history, you've had heinous crimes committed that have gone to the Supreme Court that have established the rule of law when it comes to our rights. And so a lot of times we talk about looking for this perfect case when in fact a lot of case law has come out of heinous crimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you know, but every case is different, Roland. And you know, the facts make a difference. Jurisdictions have different laws, and by the time you get to the Supreme Court, you're on an elevated kind of constitutional level where they are interpreting the facts of that case. Now, this particular case, obviously, most folks appealed the lawyer saying they didn't adequately represent me. Here, on the direct examination, he not only opened the door with this psychologist, but he invited an answer that said, my own client's black, that means he's more violent. The jury listening to that, I must tell you, it did appeal to the, it wasn't a dog whistle, it was a direct appeal to their racial instincts.
By his counsel.
But Ralph Giuliani, here's the point that I'm trying to make. I've had African Americans say when we've done a lot of these stories, man, can y'all find somebody who was innocent and not some of these folks who killed a girlfriend or a friend? And I said, this is what you don't understand. On the Supreme Court, it is etched in the outside of the walls. Equal justice under law. And what we must understand is, even if somebody is clearly guilty of a crime, if race came into play, that should not be in our criminal justice system. And so we must stop somehow thinking that, well, to appeal something, it should be based upon the innocence of the person. No, it's what is the law, the established law, equal justice under law.
Well, you know, Attorney Bolden, I think, has said it best here when we look at how does the man's lawyer put a psychologist on the stage? Are black people more violent? The psychologist says yes, people are listening, and they agree with it because this is a stereotype that has been perpetrated by white supremacy throughout our history. And so, no, we don't ever get these perfect cases where the black man was 4 blocks away and he didn't do it. The cases, as Scott says, that come out are the cases where there was guilt, but there was also clear error. And so it's appropriate that this man is resentenced. It is appropriate that maybe he didn't deserve the death penalty or even life in prison, but it's also appropriate that we begin to look systematically at the way that white supremacy has not only influenced our law, but also the enforcement of it and what juries hear.
Now, and clearly the question that came from his own counsel was completely improper. Absolutely. I mean, how can you, this guy's black, is he going to be more prone to commit future crimes?
Yeah,
you know, I mean that's insane.
But again,
the question could have been simply, given his history, is he more prone, and leave race out of it?
But here's the deal. Here's the deal. I don't care about the question. The point I'm trying to make this, and I want the audience to understand, that is, when we are talking about these stories, we are not just fixated on whether the person do it, if they were guilty or innocent. What we're saying is that in this country, if we're going to have a legal system that is supposedly free of bias, free of racism, free of bigotry. We have to understand that there are going to be those cases that are not perfect, but that speak to, again, problems with the law. And so when we've done this, I've gotten tweets, I've gotten emails from people saying, man, you know, can y'all find somebody, you know, who didn't do it? But here's the case. When you have a case where somebody who didn't do the crime, somebody who was clearly innocent, the legal precedent set in cases like this is what allows for them to be able to appeal. And so I just want folks to understand that that's also why it is important. I don't care. It doesn't matter. If you did something, whether you're guilty or innocent, bottom line is this here, you still must get the right trial. Fairness in our legal system. Unfortunately, that's not always the case when it involves black folks.
And Roland,
all right,
just
folks, coming
next
on news. Scott, I'm out of time. I can't.
Okay.
Scott, I'm out of time. I can't. Coming up next, NewsOne Now, folks. So we're going to talk about the issue of breast cancer here in, of course, the month of October. Critical issue. All that next. NewsOne Now, TV One.
Weekdays on TV One.
I will never lie to you.
Oh my God.
Roland Martin.
He doesn't want to talk to us. He wants to ignore us.
Uncensored.
Hell no.
That ain't gonna cut it, boo.
Unapologetic.
No, that is fundamentally false. You are wrong.
Unfiltered.
He wants an America where we all look alike. He ain't talking about black people.
Unrelenting.
You better go work out, because you got a fight on your hands.
NewsOne Now with Roland Martin. Weekdays at 7 a.m. on TV One.